Jaipur's streets pulsed with energy, alive with colors and movement. A young tuk-tuk driver navigated through the noise, greeting familiar faces as the city buzzed around him. He loved his work, but felt a growing frustration deep inside. Tourists often waved him down, their words a tangle of unfamiliar sounds, each time he failed to understand. The feeling of helplessness grew stronger. He wanted to do more than just drive. He wanted to connect. Learning English wasn't an easy decision, but it became unavoidable. The idea took root after countless small moments of embarrassment and missed opportunities. Determined, he resolved to take the first step toward change. Though uncertain about the path ahead, he knew it was time to try. One warm afternoon, in Jaipur, a group of tourists caught his eye near the bustling marketplace. They waved at him enthusiastically, signaling their need for a ride. His heart raced as he pulled over, unsure of how to start the conversation. With a hesitant smile, he managed a simple "hello," hoping it would be enough. The family responded with cheerful faces and a stream of English words he couldn't fully grasp. Their tone was friendly, but the meaning felt just out of reach. Through gestures and broken phrases, they communicated their desire to visit the iconic Palacio dos Ventos. He nodded, repeating, "Yes, yes," as if to reassure himself. As they climbed aboard, the father of the family tried to ask him a question. Despite not understanding fully, he pointed forward and said, "Okay," hoping it would suffice. That short exchange lingered in his mind as he began the journey. The tourists didn't seem upset, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he could have done better. By the time they reached their destination, he felt both relieved and inspired. This small moment, though brief, planted the seed of determination to learn and improve. The tuk-tuk rumbled through Jaipur's narrow streets, weaving between pedestrians and other vehicles. The tourists seemed excited, hinting at colorful buildings and chatting in English. He couldn't understand most of their conversation, but their laughter and enthusiasm filled the air. Occasionally, they would ask questions, their voices rising in curiosity. One of them leaned forward and asked, "How far is it?" The words sounded clear, but the meaning escaped him. He responded with a polite nod and a nervous smile. The father repeated the question slowly, gesturing with his hands to indicate distance. Finally, he understood the intent and replied, "Not far," his tone hesitant but confident enough. As they approached a scenic spot, another voice asked, "Can we stop for photos?" Though unfamiliar with the phrase, the request was clear from their gestures. He quickly pulled over, saying, "Yes, yes." While pointing to the view, the family stepped out, taking pictures and thanking him warmly. The father turned back and said, "You can say, it's close by." His words were kind, encouraging him to try. He repeated the phrase softly, at first, then louder. "It's close by." The family clapped, their support filling him with unexpected confidence. That small lesson felt like a breakthrough. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time, he saw English not as a barrier, but as a bridge to connect with the world around him. As the tuk-tuk rattled back to the starting point, the day's events replayed in his mind. The simple phrase, "It's close by," echoed like a tiny victory. For the first time, the idea of learning English felt within reach. It was no longer about avoiding embarrassment, but about opening doors to new opportunities. He reflected on how small phrases had changed the interaction with his passengers. Their encouragement made him realize that effort, no matter how small, was appreciated. Determined to improve, he began observing the words tourists used most often. Even gestures and tones became clues for understanding. That evening, he sat quietly, writing down the few phrases he had learned. Each word felt like a step closer to something greater. From that moment, the city streets became more than a workplace. They turned into a classroom, where every ride held the promise of a new lesson. From that moment, the city streets became more than a workplace. They turned into a classroom, where every ride held the promise of a new lesson. One afternoon, a pair of tourists from England approached him near a crowded bazaar. They wanted to visit a distant temple and asked, "Can you take us there?" He recognized the phrase immediately and responded, "Yes, I can take you there." The tourists smiled, impressed by his effort to communicate. Throughout the ride, they asked questions about the city. Though he struggled to answer fluently, his passengers remained patient and supportive. When they reached the temple, one of them said, "You're doing great." Encouraged, he asked them to teach him more phrases, like, "How much is it?" and "Where are you from?" Every word they shared was eagerly repeated. The interaction felt less like work and more like an exchange of culture and kindness. By the end of the day, his notebook held several new sentences. His pride in learning was matched by the gratitude he felt for those who took time to help him. That day wasn't just another ride. It marked a turning point where his efforts began to pay off, building not just vocabulary, but confidence. With every passing day, he noticed changes in himself. Words that once felt foreign now rolled off his tongue with growing ease. Passengers seemed to respond warmly, encouraging him with kind smiles and gentle corrections. Their support became a source of motivation. During breaks, he used his phone to explore language apps and videos. Simple exercises reinforced what he'd already learned on the job. Even small phrases like "turn left" or "thank you" felt like milestones. Each interaction became a chance to sharpen his skills. Though far from fluent, he could feel progress with every ride. The streets of Jaipur were no longer just familiar. They were filled with possibilities. Reflecting on his journey, he saw how much had changed since. That first hesitant hello. What began as fear had transformed into determination. The tuk-tuk wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a vessel for growth. Every word spoken, every phrase learned, became part of his story. As the city bustled around him, he smiled, ready for the next adventure. The road ahead was long, but he had already proven he could face it, one word at a time.